It was a silence that had a weight, a density that pressed against the eardrums and the soul. The great hull of the Galactic Council, a structure designed to echo with the vibrant, chaotic symphony of 10,000 different voices, was utterly, profoundly still. 10,000 seats, carved from the living crystals of Lyra Prime and the petrified woods of Xylos, rose in perfect, dizzying circles around the central platform. Every one was filled, beings of light and shadow, of crystal and flesh, of gas and solid matter, representatives from every corner of the known galaxy, had converged on Nexus Prime. They had not come for celebration, or for debate, or for trade. They had come because they were afraid. They had come because they were dying. At the center of that vast, silent arena stood Ambassador Zithra of the Aldrani. She was ancient, even by the long-lived standards of her people. Her silver skin, once lustrous as a neutron star's echo, had faded to a soft, pale gray, like the ash of a long-dead fire. Her 4 eyes, each capable of perceiving a different spectrum of reality, were not windows to her soul, but rather deep, still pools that held memories stretching back further than most civilizations had existed. She had witnessed the birth of stellar nurseries and the slow, graceful death of red giants. She had seen empires of sublime artistry rise in golden ages and crumble into forgotten dust. She had carried the grief of 1,000 extinct species in her heart. But she had never seen a fear like this. It wasn't the sharp, clean fear of a predator's attack. It was a cold, creeping dread, a terminal diagnosis for the entire galaxy. Her voice, when it finally came, was a soft, melodic instrument, but today it carried a tremor, a faint crack in the foundation of her millennia of composure. The Velcari Dominion has taken the Kaethar system. The words hung in the air, not as a statement, but as a verdict. That makes 17 civilizations, she continued, the number a lead weight dropped into the silent sea of the hull. 17 species, extinguished. A holographic display flickered to life above her, a beautiful, terrible tapestry of the Orion Arm. Stars and nebulae glimmered like scattered diamonds. But spreading across it, a vile, Venus red, was the territory of the Velcari. 10 years ago, that red had been a single, insignificant pixel on the edge of the galactic maps, a curiosity. Now, it was a cancer, a devouring blotch that had consumed 1/3 of the displayed space. It didn't conquer, it consumed, leaving not ruins, but void. The Theosian Republic held out for 3 months, Zithra said, her gaze sweeping across the countless faces, meeting eyes both familiar and alien. They had the largest fleet in their sector. 200,000 warships. The Velcari destroyed them in a single engagement. She paused, letting the scale of that loss sink in. There were no survivors. Not a single escape pod. Their worlds are silent, stripped bare. Their people, reduced to base organic matter to feed the Velcari war machine. A wave of sound finally broke the silence. Not shouts, but a low, desperate murmur, the sound of a universe realizing its own mortality. It was the rustle of feathered wings, the clatter of chitinous plates, the hum of bioluminescent distress signals. We cannot fight them. The voice, clear and sharp as a shard of glass, came from the upper tiers. Delegate Morven of the Crystalline Collective. His body was a marvel of living geometry, facets of internal crystal catching the hall's light and scattering it into frantic, prismatic patterns that danced across the walls. Now, those patterns were jagged, staccato, betraying his stress. Our combined fleets number perhaps 3 million vessels. Intelligence suggests the Velcari command over 20 million. And they grow stronger with every world they process. Then what do you suggest? The new voice was a low rumble, like continental plates grinding together. General Throck of the Vanguard Coalition stood, his massive, armored form a testament to a species forged in war. 4 powerful arms were crossed over a barrel chest, and a face full of tusked bone was set in a permanent grimace. His people had been the first to encounter the Velcari, the first to bleed against them. Do we simply wait for death? Do we watch from our viewports as they eat their way to our home worlds? Do we let them pick our bones clean? What choice do we have? Morven's crystalline form flickered, a visible wince. We have tried everything. Alliances, new weapons, our finest tactical minds. Nothing works. The Velcari are not like us. They do not think. They do not fear. They do not reason. They are a hive mind. Billions of creatures acting as a single, ravenous will. They do not hesitate. They do not make mistakes. They do not feel pity. They simply consume. The hall erupted. The controlled murmur became a cacophony of despair. Arguments exploded in a dozen different languages, some spoken, some signed, some broadcast on emotional frequencies. Some delegates, their cultures built on logic and acceptance, called for a managed surrender, a preservation of knowledge if not life. Others, like Throck's people, roared for one final, glorious, suicidal charge into the heart of the swarm. A species of aquatic beings from the oceans of Shalana simply wept, their mournful, ultrasonic songs causing the very air to vibrate with a grief that needed no translation. Zithra did not shout. She simply raised a slender, 3-fingered hand. Slowly, reluctantly, the noise subsided. The respect for her was not born of title, but of time. She was the memory of the galaxy made flesh, and even in their panic, they heeded her. There is one option we have not considered, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying to the farthest reaches of the hall. The silence returned, thicker than before. 10,000 beings leaned forward, a single, multi-limbed organism of desperate attention. We could contact the humans. The reaction was not unified, but it was universal. A collective, sharp intake of breath. Gasps of disbelief. Bitter, hollow laughs from species who had lost entire colonies. A few delegates, from races that had been allies of the fallen Tethan Empire, simply stood and walked out, their silence a louder condemnation than any shout. The humans. General Throck's voice was heavy with a disgust that bordered on physical revulsion. The humans are quarantined. They have been for 200 standard cycles. There is a reason for that. A very, very good reason. I know the reason, Zithra replied, her voice still quiet, but now firm. Everyone in this hall knows the reason. It is the ghost that haunts our history, the nightmare we refuse to speak of in the light of day. 2 centuries ago, humanity had emerged onto the galactic stage. They were so young, a mere blink in cosmic time, barely 1,000 years into their journey among the stars. They were vibrant, frighteningly so. Their curiosity was an insatiable hunger, their energy boundless, their desire to connect, to share, to understand, was both endearing and, to some, deeply unsettling. The Galactic Council, in a moment of optimistic expansion, had welcomed them. And then the Tethan Empire, ancient, proud, and territorial, had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They saw the humans not as peers, but as pests, as noisy, chaotic children cluttering their pristine galactic neighborhood. To teach them a lesson in hierarchy, they attacked the human colony world, New Eden. A single, brutal orbital bombardment. 50,000 civilians, men, women, children, gone in a firestorm. The Tethans expected fear. They expected capitulation. They expected a chastened species to come to the negotiating table, begging for terms. What they got was silence. For 11 days, the humans offered no response. No demands, no threats, no pleas. The galaxy watched, confused. Perhaps the humans were simply broken, their spirit crushed. On the 12th day, the Tethan Empire learned the true meaning of silence. A human fleet, of a design and power no one had known existed, emerged from a non-standard transit point at the heart of the Tethan home system. They did not issue a declaration of war. They did not offer terms of surrender. They simply began to destroy. Not with rage, not with fury, but with a cold, systematic, and terrifyingly efficient precision. World by world, station by station, ship by ship, they did not stop to accept surrender. They did not pause to take prisoners. They did not rest. In 11 days, the Tethan Empire, a civilization that had chronicled its own history for 40,000 years, was gone. Not defeated, not conquered, erased. Their worlds were not glassed. They were empty. Their fleets were not debris fields. They were vanished. Their people, billions of them, had disappeared without a trace. No bodies, no graves, no final messages. The galaxy looked upon humanity, and for the first time, understood the concept of a monster that wore a friendly face. The public fleet, the cheerful exploration vessels, the diplomatic transports, it had all been a mask. Beneath it lay a power so absolute, so ruthless, it could unmake a 40,000-year-old empire in less than a fortnight. The quarantine was not a negotiation, it was a plea. The Council, in a state of collective shock and terror, had offered humanity a deal: stay in your own space. Limit your expansion, keep to yourselves, and we will leave you alone. To the galaxy's immense, shuddering relief, the humans had agreed. A quarantine zone was established. No one went in. Nothing came out. For 200 years, humanity became a ghost story. A cautionary tale whispered in the nurseries of 1,000 worlds. Be good, or the humans will come for you. The humans are monsters, Delegate Morvan stated, his light patterns shifting to a cold, hard blue. They committed genocide against the Tethans. They are the definition of the threat we seek to avoid. Did they? Zithra asked, her 4 eyes holding Morvan's luminous form. Did anyone actually confirm that? Did anyone find bodies? Evidence of mass graves? Orbital death camps? The silence was her answer. We do not know what happened to the Tethans, Zithra pressed, her voice gaining strength. We only know that they are gone, and that the humans were responsible. But we never asked them. We were too afraid to look the monster in the eye. And now you want to invite that monster into our home. General Throck gestured around the great hall, a sweeping motion that encompassed all of civilization. You want to unleash them upon the galaxy once more. I want to survive. Zithra's voice finally broke, the raw emotion cracking through her ancient calm. It was a shocking sound. I have lived for 12,000 years. I have watched civilizations of breathtaking beauty turn to dust. I have seen horrors that would shatter a younger mind. But I have never seen anything like the Velcari. They do not want territory. They do not want resources. They do not want slaves or tribute. They want to consume everything. Every world, every star, every last spark of life. If we do not stop them, there will be nothing left. Not for us, not for our children, not for the memory of those we have lost. She paused, her chest rising and falling with uncharacteristic exertion. The humans may be dangerous. They may be unpredictable. They may be everything we fear. But right now, they are our only hope. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. It was a symphony of anguish. Old records of the Tethan extinction were brought forth, the cold, clinical reports painting pictures of unimaginable power. Scouts told hushed tales of the quarantine zone, of strange sensor ghosts, of ships that ventured too close and simply vanished, their final transmissions nothing but static. They argued until voices were hoarse and light patterns dimmed. But in the end, it was a choice between 2 fears. The Velcari were a certainty, a slow, grinding, inescapable death for all. The humans were a possibility, a gamble, a pact with a devil they did not know. The vote passed by a margin so narrow it was almost a wound in itself. A message was composed, a masterpiece of galactic diplomacy, filled with pleas to sapient kinship and the shared light of consciousness. It was stripped down, edited, and stripped down again, until all that was left was the raw, honest, terrified core of it. We need your help. The Velcari Dominion threatens all life in the galaxy. We ask that you honor the bonds of sapient kinship and stand with us against this common enemy. It was sent to the automated relay stations at the edge of the quarantine zone, the fragile, silent phones that had not been used in 2 centuries. And then, they waited. Days bled into weeks. The Velcari advance continued, relentless, consuming 2 more systems. The great hull of the Council felt less like a seat of power and more like a gilded tomb. Hope was a guttering candle in a hurricane. Some delegates secretly prayed the humans would refuse, that they would not have to trade one nightmare for another. On the 37th day, the reply came. It was not a diplomatic communique. It was not a message of solidarity. It was a set of instructions, transmitted in the stark, utilitarian format of standard galactic code. We accept. Clear all civilian traffic from the Kepler corridor within 14 standard days. Failure to comply will result in casualties for which we will not be held responsible. Do not attempt to observe our transit. Do not attempt to communicate with our vessels. Do not get in our way. That was all. No greeting. No signature. No reassurance. Ambassador Zithra read the message once, then again, her mind trying to find nuance, compassion, anything in the sterile text. There was nothing. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of action. It was the voice of something that had long since stopped asking for permission. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hull's environmental controls. It was the chill of a door, locked for 2 centuries, swinging open on silent hinges. What do we do now? General Throck asked, his warrior's bravado replaced by a profound unease. We do what they asked, Zithra said, her voice hollow. We clear the corridor. We get our people out of the way. And we pray to whatever gods we still believe in, that we have not just doomed ourselves. The waking giant, far away, in a patch of space that was a blank spot on every official galactic chart, something stirred. The orbital fortress known as Aegis Prime hung in the perpetual twilight between Earth and its moon. It was not merely large. It was a piece of geography, a mountain range forged in zero gravity, its dimensions defying belief. Yet, to any sensor in the galaxy, it did not exist. Its stealth systems were not a matter of advanced technology, but a fundamental rewriting of local physical laws. It was a secret kept from the universe itself. In her command chair, Admiral Helena Vance read the Galactic Council's plea for the 3rd time. She was in her 60s, her hair a close-cropped cap of steel gray, her face a map of lines etched not by age, but by the weight of command. Her eyes, a calm and steady blue, had seen things that would break a lesser person, and held no room for surprise anymore. For 15 years, she had been the warden of this silent gate, the guardian of humanity's self-imposed exile. She had never truly believed this day would come. And yet, here it was. The desperation in the Council's message was palpable, a stench of fear that transcended light years. They had come, hat in hand, to the monsters under their bed. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It was not a warm expression. It was the fleeting, grim satisfaction of a predator who had been patiently waiting in the long grass, knowing the herd would eventually have to cross its path. Admiral, her aide, Commander Chen, a young officer with a sharp mind and an earnest face, stood waiting. What do you want me to tell them? Vance let her gaze drift to the main viewport, to the star-dusted blackness. She thought of the Velcari. For years, she had reviewed the classified reports, the sensor ghosts from beyond the quarantine zone that told of worlds going dark, of entire biospheres being processed. She thought of the trillions of lives, each with their own loves and losses, snuffed out to feed an endless, mindless hunger. Then her mind traveled back, 2 centuries, to the dark, necessary sin that had forged their prison. The Tethans. New Eden. She knew what her predecessors had done. She knew why. She knew the terrible, soul-scarring cost of that decision, a cost that was still being paid in the quiet dreams of every human alive. And she thought of the silent, relentless growth that had occurred during their long isolation. The weapons conceived in the quiet desperation of knowing the galaxy feared them. The power harnessed not for conquest, but for a final, absolute defense. The things they had learned to do, not because they wanted to, but because they had to be ready. "Tell them we accept," she said, her voice calm, decisive. "And tell them to clear the civilians from the Kepler corridor. All of them. Every freighter. Every luxury liner. Every deep space research station. Every single living soul. I want that corridor empty." Chen's brow furrowed. "Admiral, the Kepler corridor is 12 light years long. It's the busiest shipping lane in the sector. There are thousands of habitats, millions of ships. Then they had better start moving," Vance said, turning her chair to face him, her eyes now sharp as diamond drills. "Because in 14 days, we are going to war. And I do not intend to slow down for anything." She stood, her movements economical and filled with purpose. Outside the viewport, the darkness was now dotted with the running lights of countless human vessels. An entire civilization, hidden and honed to a razor's edge, was beginning to stir. "Send the activation codes to all fleet commands," she ordered, her voice ringing with an authority that brooked no dissent. "Wake the sleeper reserves. Bring the Prometheus out of its docking cradle and have it ready for my flag. Get me a direct, secured line to the Joint Chiefs on Earth." She began walking towards the strategic planning room, Chen falling into step beside her. "The galaxy asked for our help. It's time to show them why they were right to be afraid." Chen saluted and hurried away, the weight of the moment settling on his young shoulders. Vance paused for a final moment at the viewport. The Velcari, in their blind, consuming arrogance, had no idea what was coming. The Galactic Council, in its terror, had no idea what it had unleashed. They thought the Tethan extinction was the worst humanity could do. They were children, playing with shadows, about to be exposed to the sun. She had read the sealed archives, the ones only a handful of living humans were permitted to access. She knew what had truly happened to the Tethans. She knew where they had gone. It hadn't been genocide. It had been something else, something far more terrifying in its implications. And she knew, with cold certainty, that compared to what humanity could wield now, 2 centuries later, the Tethan operation had been a gentle, almost merciful, affair. "You wanted our help," she thought, her eyes fixed on a distant, unnamed star. "You are going to get it. And when the dust settles and the screaming stops, you are going to look upon what we have done, and you will wish, with every fiber of your being, that you had found another way." Across the vast, hidden expanse of human space, a silent alarm was spreading. On shipyards carved into asteroids, in dry docks hidden within nebulae, Aboard generation ships that had been pretending to be comets for decades, lights began to activate. Engines that had been cold for generations hummed to life. Crews, trained for this moment in simulations so realistic they blurred the line with memory, reported to their stations. The great, slumbering giant was awake. And it was hungry. The Kepler corridor. An empty stage. The Kepler corridor had never known such emptiness. For millennia, it had been the vibrant, pulsing aorta of galactic travel, a river of light and life connecting the inner core systems to the resource-rich outer rim. The constant, flowing traffic of merchant freighters, gleaming passenger liners, hulking bulk haulers, and swift military patrols was a testament to a thriving, interconnected civilization. Its navigation beacons were the oldest in the galaxy, their steady pulses a lullaby of safe passage. Now, there was only void. The evacuation had been the largest, fastest, and most terrifyingly cooperative endeavor in recorded history. It had taken 12 days of frantic, unprecedented effort. Millions of ships had been rerouted, their captains obeying the panicked directives without question. Ancient, orbital habitats, home to generations of families, were powered down and left to drift, their populations evacuated on anything that could hold atmosphere. The corridor was not just quiet, it was dead, a 12-light-year-long tombstone for galactic normalcy. No one complained. No one demanded explanations. The reason was a specter that haunted every transmission, a single, terrifying word that spread through the grapevine of subspace communication: humans. At the designated observation point, a small, nervous flotilla of vessels waited. The Galactic Council had begged for the right to witness, and after a long, considering silence, the humans had acquiesced with their characteristic, brutal simplicity: watch from a distance. Do not approach. Do not scan. Passive observation only. Violation will be considered hostile. No one wanted to learn the definition of hostile from a human perspective. Ambassador Zithra stood on the command bridge of the Truth Seeker, the Aldrani vessel, a masterpiece of elegant, organic curves and subtle, living light. Her heart, or the cluster of neural tissue that served the same purpose, beat a slow, anxious rhythm. Beside her, General Throck's massive form seemed cramped in the Aldrani-designed space, his armored plates scraping softly against the walls. He had insisted on being here. If they were to be saved or damned, he would see the architects of their fate with his own eyes. Delegate Morvan floated in a contained anti-gravity field, his crystalline form unusually still, his internal light muted. In a corner, a Veth observer named Crix undulated gently, its gelatinous form rippling with nervous tension. Dozens of other species were represented, crowded onto the bridge, a living museum of galactic life united in dread. How long? Throck grumbled, the sound like grinding stones. The message said they would arrive at the corridor entrance at the 14th hour, Zithra replied, her voice calm but her hands trembling slightly. That is in approximately 3 minutes. Throck shifted his weight. They had better not be late. Every moment they preen is another system lost. Somehow, Zithra said softly, I do not think the humans are worried about the Velcari's schedule. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Every eye was fixed on the main view screen, which showed a perfectly ordinary, and therefore deeply unsettling, stretch of empty space. Stars glittered, cold and indifferent. Then, with a silence that was more deafening than any explosion, the humans arrived. There was no warning, no flash of pseudo-matter, no ripple in the fabric of space-time, no Doppler-shifted scream of engines. It was as if reality itself had a blind spot, and someone had just decided to look at it. One moment, the corridor was empty. The next, it was filled. Zithra's breath caught in her throat. Her 4 eyes widened, struggling to process the sight. There were thousands of them. The Truth Seeker's basic optical sensors counted 4,700 vessels. But it was not the number that froze the blood in her veins. It was their appearance. They were not ships, not as she understood the concept. They were shapes, angular, brutalist geometries of pure, absolute black. They weren't painted black. They seemed to be constructed from the very essence of absence. Their surfaces were flat, matte, and devoured light, making them appear as holes cut out of the star field, negative spaces in the universe. There were no running lights, no engine nacelles glowing with power, no viewports offering a glimpse of the lives within, no markings, no insignia. Just silent, motionless, impossible silhouettes against the cosmos. By the first song, whispered one of the Aldrani technicians. What are those? General Throck's voice was uncharacteristically small. No one answered. No one could. Morven's crystalline form began to vibrate, emitting a low, subsonic hum of distress. I cannot feel them, he stammered. My spatial sense, it tells me there is nothing there. My eyes see them, but my soul insists they are a mirage. An Aldrani sensor officer, his face ashen, looked up from his console. Ambassador, our passive scanners are reading them as localized spatial anomalies. Gravimetric distortions, not matter. It's as if space itself is folded into those shapes. That's impossible, Throck stated, but the conviction was gone from his voice. Ships can't do that. Nothing can do that. Human ships can. Apparently, Zithra replied, her own voice a whisper of awe and terror. The fleet began to move. There was no ignition of thrusters, no visible source of propulsion. The formations simply slid forward. It was a smooth, unified motion, thousands of vessels moving as a single entity, maintaining their perfect, geometric positions without a single vessel drifting a millimeter out of place. Zithra, who had commanded Aldrani battle groups, knew the immense, constant communication required for such precision. It was the work of a flawless, distributed consciousness. But the human fleet was silent. No calm laser chatter, no subspace traffic, not even the faint power leakage of internal systems. They moved like ghosts, guided by a will that needed no words. Follow them, Zithra ordered. The Truth Seekers. Pilot, a young Aldrani with feathers ruffled in anxiety, hesitated. Ambassador, their orders were explicit. Maintain a distance of 1,000 kilometers. And I will not sit here while they disappear into the corridor, Zithra said, her tone leaving no room for argument. We need to see. The fate of the galaxy may depend on what we learn. Follow. All observation vessels, maintain formation. But keep our distance. The flotilla of watchers moved forward, a nervous school of fish trailing a silent, black leviathan. They had to know. They had to understand. The journey through the corridor took 6 hours. 6 hours of watching the impossible. 6 hours of a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure. 6 hours of a fear that slowly curdled into a kind of religious dread. General Throck tried to apply his warrior's logic, categorizing the shapes. That large one must be a carrier. Those smaller, clustered ones, fighters. Those paired vessels, perhaps destroyers. But the more he looked, the less sense it made. The designs followed no known engineering principles. There were no visible weapon mounts, no sensor arrays, no bridge superstructures. They were just artifacts of a terrifyingly alien mindset. They are beautiful, Morven said suddenly, his voice filled with a terrible wonder. Everyone turned to stare at him. In the way Event Horizon is beautiful. In the way the absolute zero of entropy is beautiful. Perfect. Inevitable. It is the beauty of an ending. No one could muster a rebuttal. Halfway through, a communication from the human fleet shattered the silence, making everyone jump. *+ observation vessels. You have been following for 3 hours, 17 minutes. This is acceptable. Continue to maintain your current distance. When we engage the enemy, you will stay at least 10,000 kilometers from the combat zone. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Our weapons do not discriminate. **. The message ended. No signature. No request for confirmation. Our weapons do not discriminate, Throck repeated slowly. What in the name of the Forge does that mean? It means, Zithra said, a cold knot forming in her stomach, that whatever they are about to do, they cannot control its periphery. Or they have no desire to. Either way, we will do exactly as they say. The Black Fleet continued its silent procession. Finally, they reached the far end of the corridor, the transit point that would take them to the Thesan system, where the Velcari forward armada, 1.4 million vessels strong, was massing for its next attack. The human fleet stopped at the threshold. For a long moment, they simply hung there, a wall of silent darkness against the shimmering energy of the transit point. Then, a new transmission, broadcast on every frequency, in every language known to the Council. This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Human Fleet to the observation vessels. What you are about to witness is classified. You will not record it. You will not analyze it. You will not discuss it with anyone outside the Galactic Council's senior leadership. If you violate these conditions, we will know. There will be consequences. A pause that felt like a lifetime. To the Velcari Dominion. You have committed crimes against sapient life that cannot be forgiven and will not be forgotten. You have consumed 17 civilizations. You have murdered trillions. You have spread across the galaxy like a plague, taking everything and giving nothing back. Plus, another pause, heavier than the first. Plus, we are here to cure that plague. You have 60 seconds to surrender unconditionally. All Velcari forces will power down weapons and engines. All Velcari vessels will open themselves to inspection. All Velcari commanders will submit to war crimes tribunals. These terms are not negotiable. Plus, silence. On the bridge of the Truth Seeker, the silence was broken by a disbelieving scoff from General Throck. Surrender. They are offering surrender. There are 1.4 million Velcari warships in that system. We are outnumbered 300 to 1. Perhaps it is a bluff, offered the Veth observer, Crix, its form quivering. A psychological tactic. Humans do not bluff, Zithra said, her eyes fixed on the Dark Fleet. I have studied their history. When a human states something, it is because they possess the absolute capability to enforce it. If they are offering terms, it is because they believe they can enforce them against any number. The 60 seconds ticked down. There was no response from the Velcari. Of course there wasn't. The Velcari did not surrender. They did not communicate. They only consumed. When the time expired, Admiral Vance's voice returned, calm and utterly devoid of emotion. Plus, very well. Plus, the human fleet began to move toward the transit point. One by one, the black shapes slipped into the shimmering field and vanished. The observation vessels followed, their crews holding their breath, maintaining the proscribed distance. They emerged into hell. The Thesan system was a seething, organic nightmare. It was filled with the Velcari Armada, a swarm of living ships that looked like monstrous, chitinous insects, their forms a grotesque fusion of bone, muscle, and bioluminescent weapon ports. They moved in a complex, beautiful, and terrifying ballet, a perfect coordination born of a single, shared mind. They were chaos given form and purpose. The human fleet emerged and, without hesitation, spread out. Their formation seemed almost casual, a loose net cast before the swarm. The numerical disparity was so vast it was laughable. It was an act of suicide. A transmission screeched across the comms, the chittering, clicking language of the Velcari translated into cold, galactic standard. Plus tiny, separate creatures. You come to challenge the swarm. You are meat. We will consume your flesh, add your biomass to our own. Your worlds will be ours. Your species will be a memory. You are nothing. Plus, Admiral Vance's response was immediate, her voice almost bored. Plus 57 seconds. Plus, the Velcari commander's confusion was palpable. Plus 57 seconds until what? Plus until you had a chance to live. Plus, the Velcari swarm surged forward. A tidal wave of organic death, millions of weapons powering up, casting a sickly green glow across the void. They closed the distance with terrifying speed. 100,000 kilometers. 50,000. 10,000. They were almost in range. In moments, the human fleet would be engulfed, torn apart, digested. On the Truth Seeker, Zithra's hands were clenched so tightly her claws threatened to pierce her own palms. This was it. The moment of truth. Would the humans reveal their secret? Or would they die, and with them, all hope? What are they waiting for? Throck roared, his warrior's instincts screaming at the inaction. Why aren't they firing? They're going to be overwhelmed. I don't know, Zithra whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know. The leading edge of the Velcari Swarm was seconds from impact. And then the human fleet pulsed. It was the only word for it. A wave of something. Not light, not energy, not a particle stream, expanded outward from every human vessel simultaneously. It was a distortion, a fundamental retuning of reality itself, moving faster than light, faster than causality. It touched the Velcari fleet. And the Velcari fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not exploded, not scattered, gone. One moment, the view screen was filled with a seething mass of 1.4 million organic warships. The next, there was nothing. Empty space. The stars behind them shone, uninterrupted, as if the armada had never been there. No debris, no expanding clouds of plasma, no dying screams over the comms. Just silence and starlight. The entire engagement had lasted 4 seconds. On the bridge of the Truth Seeker, the silence was absolute. Delegate Morvan emitted a sharp, crystalline crack, a fracture propagating across his torso from the sheer, impossible shock. The Veth observer, Crix, lost all cohesion, collapsing into a quivering, helpless puddle. An Aldrani science officer fainted dead away, slumping over his console. General Throck stood as if turned to stone, his massive jaw hanging open, his warrior's mind simply refusing to process the input from his eyes. 1.4 million, he stammered. Gone. What did they do? Zithra could only stare, her mind reeling, her 12,000 years of experience offering no framework, no analogy, no comfort. She had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds, but she had never seen something simply unmade. I don't know, she breathed, her voice trembling with a primal terror. And I am not sure I want to know. The anatomy of extinction. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Helena Vance watched her tactical display update. The Thesan system was clear. The Velcari forward armada had been removed from the board. The operation had proceeded with flawless, clinical precision. She felt no surge of triumph. No general's pride. There was only the cold satisfaction of a complex equation being solved correctly. This was not war. It was pest control on a galactic scale. Casualties? She asked, her voice even. None, Admiral. Commander Chen reported from his station, his own voice tight with a mixture of awe and something that might have been shame. All vessels report optimal status. The effect was contained entirely within the designated engagement zone. Vance nodded. She had expected nothing less. She turned her attention to the strategic map, where the remaining Velcari forces were represented as a sprawling, red infection across the galaxy. Millions of ships, thousands of infested systems. Billions of individual Velcari, all linked to the hive mind. Set course for the next target cluster, she ordered. priority to systems with high civilian populations under immediate threat. The Velcari are recalling their forces, Admiral, Chen noted, pointing to the flow of red icons streaming back toward a single, pulsing point, the Velcari throne world. They're consolidating around their queen. As expected, Vance replied. They believe there is safety in numbers. They believe they can create a defense we cannot penetrate. She almost smiled. Almost. Continue the operation. Eliminate all Velcari forces in transit. I don't want them reinforcing their final position. Some will inevitably get through, Chen said. We can't be everywhere at once. We can be in enough places at once, Vance countered, her tone leaving no room for doubt. And for those who do escape, let them gather. Let them build their final, grand defense. When we arrive at the throne world, I want every last Velcari in one place. It's more efficient that way. Chen nodded and returned to his duties. He had served under Vance for 2 decades. He had seen her calm in the face of simulated supernovae and her resolve during the worst political storms from Earth. He trusted her with his life. But watching a million lives, however monstrous, vanish without a trace, it left a cold spot in his soul. Across the galaxy, the hunt began in earnest. The human fleet split into smaller, independent groups, each a side sweeping through Velcari territory. They did not follow supply lines or target command nodes. They simply appeared where Velcari ships were concentrated and made them cease to exist. A Velcari convoy, carrying reinforcements harvested from a consumed world, vanished in the Kaethar Nebula. A garrison of 50,000 ships, orbiting a world whose biosphere was already half digested, disappeared from sensors between one heartbeat and the next. A massive, moon-sized construction hive, birthing new warships, was erased before the first of its children could be launched. The Velcari, who had never known fear, were learning its taste. They were the ultimate predators, and now they were the prey. Some fleets turned to fight, hurling themselves at the dark human vessels with every bioplasma cannon and acid spitter blazing. The humans pulsed, and the attackers were gone. Some tried to flee, plotting random courses into the empty voids between the galactic arms. The humans were there waiting, emerging from the darkness ahead of them. Some powered down completely, becoming cold, silent rocks, hoping to hide. The humans found them anyway. Their sensors saw not matter, but the faint, psychic signature of the hive mind itself. There was no escape, no resistance, only the silent, patient, and absolute deletion of the Velcari from the story of the galaxy. Back on the Truth Seeker, the reports flooded in, each one a fresh shock to the system. Ambassador Zithra had stopped trying to count the losses. The numbers were too vast, too abstract to hold any meaning beyond the horrific. It is genocide, General Throck said one evening, his voice heavy with a new, profound weariness. The warrior in him was appalled. This was not combat, it was an abattoir. They are exterminating an entire species. The Velcari exterminated 17, Morvan countered, his voice buzzing through his damaged crystalline structure. Is this not justice? An eye for an eye. Is it? Throck shot back, turning his massive head. The Velcari killed in battle. There were fights, however one-sided. There were last stands, moments of courage, the heat of conflict. This is not a fight. This is deletion. It is the universe pressing the undo key. Zithra said nothing. She was trapped in the memory of Admiral Vance's words. They have been removed from local space-time. They are no longer present in this dimensional framework. What did that mean? Were the Velcari suffering in some unimaginable void? Were they conscious, trapped in a non-existence? Or had they simply been cancelled? Their consciousness, their very history, erased as easily as a wrong sum on a chalkboard. The philosophical and moral implications were a bottomless pit, and she was falling. A new, general transmission came from the human fleet, broadcast to every liberated and threatened world. *+ This is Admiral Helena Vance. To all species affected by the Velcari invasion. The threat is being neutralized. All Velcari forces in your territories will be removed within the next 48 hours. You may begin recovery and reconstruction operations immediately. Do not attempt to interfere with our operations. Do not attempt to communicate with our vessels. We will notify you when the operation is complete. **. The message was a statement of fact. A promise. It contained no empathy, no congratulations, no recognition of the monumental suffering it was ending. It was the voice of a janitor announcing that a toxic spill would be cleaned up by the end of the week. They are actually going to do it, Zithra said, her voice full of wonder and horror. They are going to eliminate the Velcari Dominion in 2 days. Not eliminate, Morven corrected softly, his light dim. They are going to unwrite them. The throne world. A final defiance. On a world that orbited a dying red sun, a world that was less a planet and more a single, planet-sized organism. The Velcari hive queen felt her children die. She was ancient, older than the star she circled, a being of pure, refined biological will. For millions of years, she had guided her species, a single, brilliant consciousness at the center of a billion-pointed web of thought. She had consumed civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, their art, their very essence, adding their experiences to her own vast memory. She was the apex of evolution, the end of every food chain, the great devourer. And now, for the first time since her larval stage, she was afraid. The disconnections were not the messy, painful severing of death in battle. They were clean, instantaneous cuts. One moment, a node in her mind, a commander, a drone, a worker, was there, its thoughts and sensations a part of her. The next, it was not dead, not silent, absent, as if it had never been woven into the tapestry of her consciousness at all. She cast her mind out across the galaxy, across the dwindling network, screaming a silent question. What is happening? The responses were fragments of terror from her sub-queens and prime commanders. Plus they are here. The dark ships. They do not fight. They simply make us gone. Plus find out. Plus she commanded, her will a psychic shockwave. Plus send scouts. I must know what weapon they use. Plus, but even as she gave the order, a deep, ancestral memory stirred. A legend, passed from queen to queen since time immemorial. A warning of a species from a small, blue world on the galactic fringe. A species that should have been weak, soft, divided. A species that had been sealed away by the others, not out of contempt, but out of fear. The humans. She had dismissed them, ordered her fleets to bypass their quarantined space. There was easier, more plentiful prey. Now she understood her arrogance. Plus recall all forces. Plus she screamed into the hive mind, the command echoing across 1,000 light years. Plus every fleet, every ship, every spawn. Bring them home. Defend the throne world. Plus, obediently, the great Velcari Swarm began to disengage. Occupation fleets abandoned half-digested worlds. Construction hives fell silent. The great, consuming tide receded, pulling back to the one place they believed they could make a stand. But even as they regrouped, the silent, dark hunters continued their work. The human fleet moved with an omniscient precision, appearing at the transit points the Velcari needed to use, waiting for them in the empty voids. The connections in the Hive Queen's mind winked out by the hundreds, by the thousands. They were not regrouping. They were being systematically culled. She gathered her remaining children around her. 800,000 ships. The last, best hope of her species. They formed a perfect, multi-layered sphere around the throne world, a biological fortress of chitin and muscle and weaponized flesh, the most powerful defensive formation the Velcari had ever conceived. She reached out to them, to the millions of minds that were now her entire universe. Plus they will come for us. They will try to end our great song. But we will not fade quietly. We will fight. We will resist. And even if our story ends here, we will make them remember the name Velcari. Plus, her children responded with a wave of defiant hunger, a psychic roar that shook the very space around their world. They would fight. They would not surrender. But deep in her ancient, labyrinthine mind, beneath the fury and the pride, the Hive Queen felt a new, chilling certainty. She was going to lose. The liberation of Cathos IV. The liberation of Cathos IV should have been the happiest day in the planet's recent history. For 3 years, the Cathrani people had lived under the Velcari occupation. Their graceful, floating cities had been torn from the sky and dissolved into nutrient sludge. Their population, a species of gentle, avian-like beings, had been systematically harvested, their songs and stories extinguished to feed the silent, ravenous swarm. Their world was a scar, its vibrant blue and green hues replaced by the sickly gray and purple of Velcari biomass. Now, the Velcari were gone. The garrison of nearly 100,000 ships that had hung in their sky like a cancerous cloud had simply vanished between one blink and the next. The occupation was over. They were free. But in the shattered remains of their capital city, there was no celebration. No songs of joy echoed from the broken spires. The survivors gathered in the ash-filled plazas and looked up, not at the empty sky, but at the dark, angular shapes of the human fleet, visible high in the atmosphere as they moved toward the next transit point. They did not cheer. They did not weep with relief. They were too afraid. Prime Minister Kale stood on the fractured balcony of the Grand Perch, what was left of the government headquarters. The elegant, woven wood structure was half gone, dissolved by Velcari digestive enzymes. What remained was a skeletal, tragic frame. "What do we tell them?" asked his aide, a young female named Tila, her vibrant plumage still dulled by shock and malnutrition. Kale watched the sky. The human ships were like shards of night, indifferent and alien. They had not landed. They had sent no envoys. They had not even acknowledged the world they had just saved. They had simply appeared, erased the nightmare, and moved on, as if tidying up a minor inconvenience. "Tell them to be grateful," he said finally, his voice rough. "Tell them we have been saved. Tell them to rebuild, to find the survivors, to plant new seeds in the poisoned soil, to live again. And the humans," Tila pressed, her large, dark eyes reflecting the dark shapes in the sky. Kale was silent for a long time, watching until the last black sliver vanished from sight. "Tell them," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "to pray. Pray that the humans never, ever have a reason to come back." This scene, in countless variations, played out across the galaxy. World after world was freed. Species after species was given back its future. And everywhere, the reaction was the same. A profound, soul-deep relief, inextricably tangled with a new, perhaps even greater, terror. The humans were not saviors. They were a force of nature, and their passage left not just salvation in its wake, but a chilling void where certainty used to be. The offer of mercy. On the Prometheus, Admiral Vance reviewed the latest data. 14 systems cleared. 12 billion sentient beings saved from imminent processing. The numbers were staggering, but she focused on the ones that mattered. The estimated 8 billion who would have been dead within the day if her fleet had been hours later. This was the reason. Not power, not glory, not even security for humanity. It was this. The prevention of a wrong on a cosmic scale. "Admiral," Chen's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Priority communication from Earth." Chancellor Morrison. Vance frowned. The leader of the civilian government rarely contacted her directly, and never during an active operation. "Put it through." Chancellor Morrison's face appeared on her screen. He looked old, weary, the weight of humanity's solitude etched into every line on his face. He had been the primary voice against answering the Council's call. "Helena," he began, bypassing formalities. "I have concerns. Significant ones." "You always have concerns, Robert," Vance replied, her tone neutral. "This time, they are shared by the entire Security Council. The galactic community is terrified, Helena. Our allies are terrified. The species we've liberated look at our ships with more fear than they ever held for the Velcari. They should be grateful. They are. But gratitude is a fragile thing when it's built on a foundation of terror. They're wondering what happens when the Velcari are gone. They're wondering if they'll be next. Vance felt a familiar frustration rise. We are not conquerors. We have never sought empire. We want to be left alone. You know that. I know that. But they don't. Morrison's voice rose with passion. All they see is a power that can unmake fleets with a thought. A power they cannot comprehend, let alone defend against. Fear makes people irrational, Helena. It makes them do stupid, desperate things. What would you have me do? Apologize for saving them. When you reach the throne world, Morrison said, his tone becoming deliberate, I want you to offer them surrender terms. Real terms. Not the ultimatum you gave at Thiessen. Give them a chance to survive. Show the galaxy that we are capable of mercy. That we can be reasoned with. That we are not the monsters they believe us to be. Vance stared at him, her expression granite. You want me to spare the Velcari? After everything they've done, after the trillions they've murdered, I want you to show the galaxy that we are more than our worst capabilities, Morrison implored. The offer must be made. Let them see we tried. When the Velcari refuse, as they will, then you may do what you must. But the record must show we offered a path other than annihilation. Vance was silent for a long moment, her mind weighing the cold calculus of war against the fragile politics of peace. She saw the logic, but she also saw the millions of Velcari ships, the ravenous hive mind that knew only consumption. Mercy was a concept as alien to them as the Velcari were to humanity. Fine, she said finally, the word tasting like ash. I will offer surrender terms. But when they refuse, and they will refuse, I will end this. Completely. That is all I ask, Morrison said, his shoulders slumping in relief. Good luck, Admiral. The screen went dark. Vance turned back to the star chart, her eyes fixed on the pulsing icon of the Velcari throne world. The final act was approaching. The last transmission. The journey to the throne world took 3 days. 3 days of silent travel through a galaxy holding its breath. On the Truth Seeker, the mood was funereal. They had witnessed the impossible become routine. On the second day, Zithra, driven by a need she could not fully articulate, sent a personal, encrypted message to Admiral Vance. Admiral Vance, I know you are occupied with the business of saving us. I know my questions are those of a child asking a physicist to explain the universe. But I must ask, when this is over, what happens? Will you return to your solitude? Will you lock the door once more and leave us to our devices? I ask because I am afraid. Not of you, but of the uncertainty. For 200 years, we lived with the specter of what you might be. Now we have seen it. And I do not know if that knowledge makes me feel safer, or more terrified than ever. Please. A word. A promise. Anything to help us understand what comes next. She did not expect a reply. But a few hours later, one came. It was not from Vance, but from a younger woman, her face sharp and intelligent, her eyes holding a depth of sadness that seemed incongruent with her youth. Ambassador Zithra, Admiral Vance has asked me to respond. She is occupied with final preparations. She wished for you to know that she appreciates your message. The woman paused, her gaze intense. You asked why we came. The Admiral told the Hive Queen. But I think you need to hear it, too. 200 years ago, you quarantined us. Because you were afraid of what we might become. You gave us time. Time to think. Time to grow. Time to look out at the universe and ask ourselves one simple, terrible question. If something truly threatened everything we held dear, how far would we be willing to go to stop it? The answer, Ambassador, is that there is no such thing as too far. There is only whatever it takes. We do not want to rule you. We do not want your worship or your fear. We want to live our lives. We want to watch our children grow. We want to paint our pictures and write our songs and explore the quiet corners of creation in peace. And we want, with every fiber of our being, for every other sapient creature to have that same chance. The Velcari took that chance from 17 civilizations. They would have taken it from you, and from everyone else. So we stopped them, not for glory, not for power, but because it was the right thing to do. We are going home now. We will close our borders. We hope you will respect that. But know this. If another threat like the Velcari ever emerges, if another darkness rises that preys upon the innocent and the helpless, we will come again. We will do what must be done. And we will not apologize for it. The young woman offered a faint, tired smile, full of an ancient loneliness. Goodbye, Ambassador. I hope we never have to meet again. Because if we do, it will mean that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. The transmission ended. Zithra played it once, then again, committing the words to memory. It was not a comfort, but it was an understanding. They were not gods. They were not monsters. They were guardians, and the price of their guardianship was a terror so absolute it bordered on the divine. The end of song. The human fleet emerged from its final jump and arrayed itself around the Velcari throne world. The planet was a horror of pulsating, organic matter, a cancer grown to planetary scale. Surrounding it, a perfect, beautiful, and tragic sphere of 800,000 Velcari warships waited, their biological weapons glowing with a final, defiant energy. On the Prometheus, Admiral Vance felt the strange calm that always preceded the storm. She looked at the tactical display, at the last great concentration of the enemy, and felt nothing but the weight of necessity. Open a channel to the Hive Queen, she ordered. All frequencies. The channel opened. There was no visual, only the chittering, screeching presence of the hive mind, translated. Plus this is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Human Fleet to the Velcari Hive Queen. Your empire is destroyed. Your forces are gone. You are surrounded. I am authorized to offer you surrender terms. Plus, she listed the terms: disarmament, inspection, tribunals, restrictions, survival. Plus these terms are generous. More generous than you deserve. I advise you to accept them. Plus, the response was immediate, a psychic scream of pure, undiluted hatred. Plus surrender. We are the Velcari. We have consumed civilizations older than the dust from which your species crawled. We do not kneel. We do not submit. We do not beg. We will fight. We will make you remember US. Plus, the channel closed. Vance had expected nothing less. She had kept her promise to Morrison. The record would show the offer was made. She took a slow breath, her hand hovering over the engagement control. For a moment, she saw not the enemy, but the trillions of lives the Velcari had ended. The songs unsung, the art unmade, the stories untold. She saw the faces of the beings on Catho's IV, looking up at her ships with terror and gratitude. All vessels, she said, her voice clear and steady in the silent bridge. Execute final sanction. The human fleet pulsed. A wave of unreality expanded, a shimmer in the fabric of everything. It touched the 800,000 ships of the defensive sphere. And they were gone. It touched the planet below, the great, living hive. And it, too, was gone. The throne world, the hive queen, the last of the Velcari, erased from local space-time. Removed from the dimensional framework. The entire engagement lasted 3 seconds. In the observation fleet, the silence was absolute. There were no more cries of shock, no more fainting spells. There was only a numb, hollowed-out acceptance. They had witnessed the end of a species, the closing of a multi-million-year chapter of history, and it had been as simple as turning off a light. General Throck sat down heavily, his armor creaking. He said nothing. Delegate Morven's light was so dim he was almost invisible. Ambassador Zithra simply bowed her head. A final transmission came from the Prometheus. Plus this is Admiral Helena Vance. The Velcari Dominion has been neutralized. The threat to galactic civilization is eliminated. The United Human Fleet will return to human space. We ask that you remember the species that were lost. They should be remembered. Vance, out. Plus, epilogue. The weight of memory. The humans left as they had come. Silently, and without ceremony. One moment, their dark fleet was there. The next, the space around the vanished throne world was empty. The galaxy began the long, slow work of healing. Worlds were reclaimed. Cities were rebuilt. The memorial on Nexus Prime was constructed, a soaring spire of crystal and light, inscribed with the names of the 17 consumed species. At its base was Zithra's inscription. In memory of the lost. In gratitude to the saviors. In hope for a future where such sacrifices are never needed again. Some nights, Zithra would stand before it, her ancient heart heavy. They had been saved. The Velcari were gone. But at what cost? The humans had revealed a power that made a mockery of all other power. They were now the unspoken, unacknowledged rulers of the galaxy, not by conquest, but by the sheer, terrifying fact of their existence. But they had kept their word. They had come, they had fought, and they had gone home. They had asked for nothing. On a quiet, green world orbiting a stable star, Admiral Helena Vance sat on the porch of her small house, watching the sun set over a placid lake. She had refused all honors, all interviews. The burden was finally laid down. Years later, as she lay dying, surrounded by her family, her last words were to her granddaughter, a bright-eyed young woman who had just received her commission. Remember why we fight. Vance whispered, her voice faint but clear. Not for glory, not for power, not for revenge. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Never forget that. I promise, grandmother, the young woman said, tears in her eyes. And far away, in the great, dark tapestry of the cosmos, the stars continued to burn. Civilizations rose and fell. The legend of humanity became a myth, then a religion, then a footnote. But it was never forgotten. The galaxy had learned a terrible, beautiful truth. That in the quiet, quarantined corner of space, there lived a species that held the power of uncreation in its hands. And that the same hands that could unmake worlds were also the hands that had, once, reached out to save them all. It was a story of monsters and saviors, and the thin, blurred line between them. And in the deep, silent dark between the stars, something ancient and patient had taken notice. Something had marked the small, blue world as interesting. But that is a story for another time. For now, there was peace.